My name is Sarah, and I'm a 32-year-old kindergarten teacher living in the quiet suburbs of Denver, Colorado. I've always loved the simple things in life, spending time with my family, hiking in the Rocky Mountains, and nurturing young minds. I found my calling early on and couldn't imagine doing anything else. My days were filled with laughter, colorful drawings, and the boundless energy of 5-year-olds. Life felt complete when I married Mark, a charming software engineer I met at a local coffee shop. He was everything I ever wanted: kind, supportive, and incredibly funny. We built a cozy life together in our little house, filled with love, laughter, and the occasional board game night. My Aunt Carol was a different story. She was my mother's younger sister, always the free spirit, flitting from job to job and relationship to relationship. Carol was the kind of person who thrived on drama and attention. While I loved her, I also knew to keep her at arm's length. She had a knack for creating chaos wherever she went, and I preferred my life to be as calm and predictable as possible. Still, family is family, and when Carol called me one rainy Tuesday, her voice laced with desperation, I couldn't turn her away. She claimed she'd been evicted from her apartment and had nowhere else to go. "Sarah, honey, you're the only one I can turn to," she pleaded. "Just until I get back on my feet. A week, maybe 2 tops." I hesitated. Mark and I had a good routine, and I knew Carol's presence would disrupt it, but the guilt gnawed at me. How could I leave my aunt out on the street? "Okay, Carol," I relented. "You can stay with us, but just for a little while." The first few days were manageable. Carol mostly kept to herself, spending her time watching television and making phone calls. She always seemed to be on the phone with someone, her voice a low, conspiratorial whisper. I tried to ignore it, focusing on my work and my marriage. But as the days turned into a week, Carol's true colors began to emerge. She started criticizing my cooking, rearranging my furniture, and offering unsolicited advice on my marriage. "Mark needs a woman who knows how to keep him happy, darling," she'd say with a sly smile. "You're too focused on those kids." I brushed it off as Carol being Carol, but her words stung more than I cared to admit. One afternoon, I came home early from school with a terrible migraine. The bright lights and the children's constant chatter had aggravated my head, and I just needed to lie down in a dark, quiet room. As I quietly opened the front door, I heard hushed voices coming from the bedroom. A wave of unease washed over me. I crept closer, my heart pounding in my chest, and slowly pushed the door open. What I saw shattered my world into a million pieces. Mark and Carol were in my bed. The image was burned into my mind. Mark's face contorted in a mixture of shock and guilt, Carol's smug expression as she looked at me over Mark's shoulder. The air crackled with betrayal. I didn't scream, I didn't cry. I simply stood there, paralyzed by disbelief. Finally, I found my voice, a cold, detached whisper. "Get out," I said, my eyes fixed on Mark. "Both of you get out of my house." Mark stammered, trying to explain, but I cut him off. "I don't want to hear it, just go." Carol, surprisingly, didn't say a word. She gathered her things with a strange sense of satisfaction, a smirk playing on her lips. As they walked out the door, I felt a sense of numbness wash over me. My husband, my aunt, my life as I knew it, all gone in an instant. I was alone, betrayed, and utterly heartbroken. I sank to the floor, tears streaming down my face, and wondered how I could ever recover from this. What would I do now? The days that followed were a blur of tears, sleepless nights, and endless replays of that horrific scene in my head. I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep, and I certainly couldn't face my kindergarten class. I called in sick, telling the principal I had a terrible flu. In reality, I was suffering from a broken heart, a pain far worse than any physical ailment. My friends rallied around me, offering support and comfort, but nothing could fill the void left by Mark's betrayal. I felt like I had been living a lie, that the man I thought I knew and loved was a complete stranger. The anger started to simmer beneath the surface, a slow-burning rage that threatened to consume me. I wanted to scream, to lash out, to make them both pay for what they had done to me. But I knew that wasn't the answer. I couldn't let them destroy me. I needed to find a way to move on, to rebuild my life, and to make them regret the day they ever crossed me. I started by focusing on myself. I went to therapy, started exercising, and reconnected with old friends. I spent hours hiking in the mountains, letting the fresh air and stunning scenery clear my head. Slowly, I began to heal. The pain was still there, but it was no longer all-consuming. I started to think about the future, about what I wanted my life to look like. And that's when the idea of revenge started to take shape. It wasn't about hurting them physically or emotionally. It was about showing them that I was stronger than they thought, that I could thrive without them, and that they had made a terrible mistake. I knew I needed a plan, something that would hit them where it hurt the most. But what could I do that would truly make them regret their actions? I knew that simply moving on and being happy wouldn't be enough. They needed to see that their betrayal had consequences, that their actions had a ripple effect that would come back to haunt them. My first target was Mark. I knew his job was his life. He poured his heart and soul into his work as a software engineer, and he was incredibly proud of his accomplishments. I also knew that he had been working on a major project for months, a project that could make or break his career. That gave me an idea. During our marriage, Mark had often shared his work with me, seeking my opinion and advice. He trusted me implicitly, never suspecting that I would ever use his secrets against him. But now, everything had changed. I remembered him complaining about a disgruntled coworker, a man named Tom who felt overlooked and underappreciated. Tom had the skills and the ambition, but he lacked the connections and the confidence to make a move. I decided to become his connection. I subtly reached out to Tom, pretending to be a concerned friend of Mark's who had heard rumors about his dissatisfaction. I offered to listen, to provide support, and to help him navigate the corporate world. Slowly, I gained his trust. He started confiding in me, sharing his frustrations and his aspirations. And then I dropped the bomb. I told him about Mark's project, the one he had been working on for months. I didn't give him all the details, just enough to pique his interest and to give him a competitive edge. I knew that Tom, being the ambitious and driven person he was, wouldn't be able to resist the temptation. He would use the information to his advantage, and Mark's project would be jeopardized. It was a risky move, but I was willing to take the chance. I wanted Mark to feel the same sense of betrayal and disappointment that I had felt when I found him with Carol. I wanted him to know that his actions had consequences. A few weeks later, I received a call from a mutual friend who worked at Mark's company. She told me that Tom had presented a proposal to the higher-ups that was remarkably similar to Mark's project. The higher-ups were impressed with Tom's initiative and his innovative ideas, and they decided to give him the green light to move forward. Mark was furious. He accused Tom of stealing his ideas, but Tom denied it, claiming that he had come up with them independently. The higher-ups didn't know who to believe, but they ultimately sided with Tom, as he had presented his proposal first. Mark's project was shelved, and his reputation within the company took a major hit. He was devastated. I heard through the grapevine that he was working long hours, trying to salvage his career, but the damage was already done. I felt a sense of satisfaction knowing that my plan had worked. Mark had lost his project, his reputation, and possibly his career. He was finally experiencing the pain that he had inflicted on me, but I knew that this was just the beginning. I still had Carol to deal with. She was the one who had orchestrated the entire affair, the one who had knowingly betrayed me and destroyed my marriage. I needed to find a way to make her pay as well. What could I do to make Carol's life a living hell? Carol's weakness was her constant need for validation and attention. She craved the spotlight, and she would do anything to get it. I knew that if I could somehow deprive her of that attention, I could truly hurt her. Carol had always dreamed of being an actress, but she never had the talent or the dedication to make it happen. She had dabbled in community theater, but she always ended up with minor roles, overshadowed by more talented performers. I decided to exploit her desire for fame and recognition. I knew that Carol had recently auditioned for a local play, a production of A Streetcar Named Desire. She had set her heart on playing the role of Blanche DuBois, the iconic and tragic Southern belle. I knew that if she got the part, she would be insufferable. She would constantly talk about the play, quote lines from the script, and demand everyone's attention. I couldn't let that happen. I decided to sabotage her audition. I knew that the director of the play was a close friend of mine, a woman named Susan who had always been supportive of my theatrical pursuits. I reached out to Susan, explaining the situation and asking for her help. I told her about Carol's affair with Mark, about her betrayal and her manipulative behavior. Susan was horrified. She couldn't believe that Carol would do something so despicable. She agreed to help me get revenge. We came up with a plan to ensure that Carol wouldn't get the part. On the day of the audition, Susan made sure that Carol was scheduled to go last. This would give Carol plenty of time to get nervous and to overthink her performance. Susan also made sure that the other actresses who were auditioning for the role were incredibly talented and experienced. This would further intimidate Carol and make her feel inadequate. When Carol finally took the stage, she was a nervous wreck. She stumbled over her lines, forgot her blocking, and generally gave a terrible performance. Susan, pretending to be sympathetic, offered Carol some constructive criticism, pointing out her flaws and suggesting ways to improve. But her words were just thinly veiled insults, designed to undermine Carol's confidence even further. Carol left the audition feeling defeated and humiliated. A few days later, she received a call from Susan, informing her that she had not been cast in the play. Carol was devastated. She had poured her heart and soul into the audition, and she couldn't believe that she had been rejected. She blamed Susan, accusing her of being biased and unfair. But Susan simply shrugged it off, telling Carol that she just wasn't right for the part. Carol's dreams of stardom were shattered. She was left feeling rejected, humiliated, and utterly defeated. I knew that my plan had worked. I had deprived Carol of the attention and validation that she craved, and I had made her feel like a complete failure. She was finally experiencing the consequences of her actions. With both Mark and Carol dealt with, I felt a sense of closure, but not satisfaction. I had exacted my revenge, but it hadn't brought me the peace I had hoped for. The anger and bitterness still lingered, a constant reminder of the pain they had caused me. I realized that true healing wouldn't come from revenge, but from forgiveness and self-acceptance. I decided to focus on rebuilding my life, on creating a future that was filled with love, happiness, and genuine connections. I threw myself into my work, finding solace in the laughter and innocence of my kindergarten students. I reconnected with old friends and made new ones, surrounding myself with people who supported and uplifted me. I started exploring new hobbies, taking art classes, and joining a hiking club. I discovered a passion for painting and a love for the outdoors. Slowly, I began to heal, to let go of the past, and to embrace the future. I learned to forgive myself for the mistakes I had made and to accept that I couldn't control the actions of others. I realized that the only person I could control was myself, and I chose to focus on being the best version of myself that I could be. I was still single, but I wasn't lonely. I enjoyed my own company, and I was open to the possibility of finding love again someday. But I wasn't going to rush into anything. I wanted to find someone who truly valued and respected me, someone who wouldn't betray my trust. One sunny afternoon, as I was browsing through a local bookstore, I bumped into an old acquaintance named David. David and I had known each other in college, but we had lost touch after graduation. He was a kind and intelligent man with a warm smile and a gentle demeanor. We struck up a conversation, and I was surprised at how easily we connected. We talked for hours, sharing our stories, our dreams, and our fears. I learned that David was a teacher as well, teaching history at a nearby high school. He was passionate about his work and dedicated to his students. I was immediately drawn to his intelligence, his humor, and his genuine kindness. We exchanged numbers and promised to stay in touch. Over the next few weeks, David and I started spending more time together. We went hiking, visited museums, and had dinner at local restaurants. I found myself falling for him, and I knew that he felt the same way about me. He was everything I had ever wanted in a partner: kind, supportive, intelligent, and funny. He treated me with respect and made me feel valued and appreciated. I was hesitant to open my heart again, afraid of being hurt like I had been with Mark. But David was patient and understanding, and he reassured me that he would never do anything to betray my trust. Slowly, I let my guard down and allowed myself to fall in love again. David was different from Mark. He was genuine, honest, and loyal. He loved me for who I was, flaws and all. He made me feel safe and secure, and he helped me to heal from the pain of the past. I knew that I had found someone special, someone who would be my partner, my friend, and my soulmate. A year later, David and I got married in a small, intimate ceremony surrounded by our family and friends. It was the happiest day of my life. I had finally found true love and happiness, and I knew that I had made the right decision. As I looked at David standing at the altar, his eyes filled with love and adoration, I couldn't help but think about Mark and Carol. I wondered if they were happy, if they regretted their actions, and if they ever thought about me. I didn't care. I had moved on, I had healed, and I had found a new life filled with love and joy. I had learned that revenge wasn't the answer, that forgiveness and self-acceptance were the keys to true happiness. As David and I exchanged our vows, I made a silent promise to myself to never let the pain of the past define me. I was strong, I was resilient, and I was worthy of love and happiness. I was finally free. But just as I thought the past was truly behind me, I received a shocking phone call. It was from Mark. His voice was weak and filled with despair. He told me that Carol had left him for another man, a wealthy businessman she had met at a charity event. She had taken all of his money and left him with nothing. He was now living in a small apartment, struggling to make ends meet. His career was in shambles, and he had lost all of his friends. He begged me for forgiveness, telling me that he realized he had made a terrible mistake. He said that he missed me, that he loved me, and that he wanted to come back to me. I was stunned. I couldn't believe that Mark, the man who had betrayed me and destroyed my life, was now begging for my forgiveness. I felt a mix of emotions, anger, pity, and a strange sense of satisfaction. I wanted to tell him to go to hell, to make him suffer the same pain that he had inflicted on me. But I knew that wouldn't solve anything. I had already moved on, I had found happiness, and I didn't need his apology. I took a deep breath and calmly told him that I forgave him. I said that I hoped he could find peace and happiness in his life, but that I couldn't be a part of it. I wished him well and hung up the phone. I felt a sense of closure, a final release from the past. I had finally let go of the anger and bitterness, and I was truly free. As I turned to David, who had been listening to the conversation with a concerned expression, I knew that I had made the right decision. I had chosen love, forgiveness, and happiness over revenge and hatred. And that was the best revenge of all. He wrapped his arms around me, holding me tight, and whispered, "I'm so proud of you." I smiled and leaned into his embrace, knowing that I was exactly where I was supposed to be. My life wasn't perfect, but it was filled with love, laughter, and genuine connections. And that was all that mattered. A few months later, I received an invitation to Carol's wedding. I almost threw it in the trash, but curiosity got the better of me. I had to see what kind of man she had managed to sink her claws into this time. David, sensing my internal conflict, encouraged me to go. "Show her how far you've come," he said. "Show her that you're not the same woman she betrayed." I hesitated, but ultimately decided he was right. I deserved to show up, not for her, but for myself. I wanted to prove that I wasn't broken, that I had thrived in spite of her. The wedding was held at a lavish estate just outside of Denver. The guests were dripping in wealth, the champagne flowed freely, and the air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume. I spotted Carol almost immediately. She was wearing a ridiculously extravagant gown, her face plastered with a wide, almost manic smile. Beside her stood her new husband, a man who looked at least 20 years her senior with a receding hairline and a perpetually bored expression. He looked every bit the wealthy businessman Mark had described. As I made my way through the crowd, I could feel Carol's eyes on me. She excused herself from a conversation and approached me, her smile faltering slightly as she took in my appearance. I had chosen a simple, elegant dress that flattered my figure and highlighted my natural beauty. I wasn't trying to outshine her, but I knew that I looked good, confident, and happy. "Sarah," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness, "I'm so glad you could make it." "Wouldn't miss it for the world, Carol," I replied, my voice calm and even. "You look radiant." "Oh, thank you, darling," she gushed, clearly fishing for compliments. "He's just so wonderful. He gives me everything I've ever wanted." I raised an eyebrow, taking a sip of my champagne. "Everything?" Carol's smile wavered again. "Well, almost everything," she stammered. "Anyway, I'm so glad you're doing well. I heard you got married again. To a teacher, right? How quaint." I laughed, a genuine, heartfelt laugh that echoed through the room. "Yes, a teacher," I said. "He's the most wonderful man I've ever met. He loves me for who I am, not for what I have." "It's a kind of love you wouldn't understand, Carol." Her face flushed with anger. "And what's that supposed to mean?" I leaned in close, my voice barely a whisper. "It means that you'll never be truly happy, Carol. You'll always be chasing the next shiny object, the next source of validation. You'll never be content with what you have because you'll never be content with yourself." I straightened up, smiling sweetly. "But congratulations, Carol. I truly hope this one lasts, for your sake." I turned and walked away, leaving her speechless and seething with rage. As I walked towards David, who was waiting for me with a warm smile, I knew that I had finally won. Not because I had taken revenge, but because I had risen above it. I had found true happiness, while Carol was still trapped in her cycle of seeking validation and attention. I had broken free from her toxic influence, and I was finally living my best life. And that, I realized, was the ultimate revenge. As I stood there, watching Carol mingle with her newfound high society friends, a chilling thought crossed my mind. What if this wasn't just about Carol seeking validation? What if this was part of a larger scheme, a calculated plan to climb the social ladder, using and discarding people along the way? The idea sent a shiver down my spine. I had to know for sure. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Carol's actions than met the eye, that she was playing a much deeper game than I had initially realized. My peaceful life with David was everything I had ever wanted, but this nagging suspicion about Carol threatened to disrupt it all. I knew I had to investigate to uncover the truth, no matter how unsettling it might be. But where would I even begin? Carol was a master manipulator, skilled at concealing her true intentions. I needed a new approach, a way to see past her carefully constructed facade. Maybe, just maybe, Mark could help. He had been Carol's accomplice, her partner in crime. He knew her secrets, her weaknesses, her true desires. It was a long shot, but I had nothing to lose. I decided to pay Mark a visit. Finding his new apartment was easy enough. A quick search of public records revealed a small, rundown building on the outskirts of town. As I drove there, I couldn't help but feel a sense of apprehension. Seeing Mark again would undoubtedly bring back painful memories, but the potential reward, the chance to finally understand Carol's motives, was worth the risk. The apartment building was even worse than I had imagined, a far cry from the comfortable suburban home we had once shared. As I climbed the creaky stairs to his floor, I wondered how Mark, a man who had once been so proud and successful, could have fallen so far. I knocked on the door, my heart pounding in my chest. A moment later, the door creaked open, and there he was. Mark looked like a ghost of his former self. His eyes were sunken, his face was gaunt, and his clothes were rumpled and stained. He stared at me in disbelief, his mouth agape. "Sarah," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "What are you doing here?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. "I need your help, Mark," I said. "It's about Carol." He hesitated for a moment, then stepped aside, allowing me to enter. The apartment was small and sparsely furnished, a stark contrast to the life we had once shared. The air was thick with the smell of stale cigarettes and despair. I sat down on the edge of the worn-out couch, trying to ignore the squalor. Mark remained standing, his eyes fixed on the floor. "What do you want to know?" he asked, his voice barely audible. I explained my suspicions about Carol, my belief that she was playing a larger game, using people for her own selfish gain. Mark listened intently, his expression growing increasingly grim. When I finished, he let out a long, weary sigh. "You have no idea," he said. "Carol is capable of anything." He went on to tell me stories about Carol's past, about her manipulative tactics, her insatiable ambition, and her complete lack of empathy. He revealed that she had always been obsessed with wealth and status, and that she had always been willing to do whatever it took to get what she wanted. He told me about her previous relationships, how she had used and discarded men like toys, leaving a trail of broken hearts and shattered dreams in her wake. As I listened to Mark's revelations, I began to see Carol in a new light. She wasn't just a free spirit or a drama queen, she was a predator, a sociopath who preyed on the vulnerable. I felt a surge of anger, not just at Carol, but at myself for being so naive, for allowing her to manipulate me so easily. Mark's information was valuable, but it wasn't enough. I needed proof, something concrete that would expose Carol's true nature. I asked Mark if he had any documents, any emails, anything that would incriminate her. He shook his head. "Carol is too smart for that," he said. "She never leaves a paper trail." Just as I was about to give up, Mark hesitated. "There is one thing," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Her diary." My heart skipped a beat. A diary? It was the perfect opportunity, a window into Carol's twisted mind. I pressed Mark for more information. He explained that Carol had always kept a diary, a secret journal where she recorded her thoughts, her plans, and her innermost desires. He had seen her writing in it countless times, but he had never been able to read it. He didn't know where she kept it now, but he suspected it was hidden somewhere in her new husband's mansion. The thought of breaking into Carol's new home filled me with dread. It was a risky and potentially dangerous plan, but the temptation was too great to resist. I had to get my hands on that diary. I knew that breaking into the mansion would be a challenge. Security would be tight, and I had no experience in burglary. I needed help, someone with the skills and expertise to pull off such a daring feat. I thought about hiring a private investigator, but I couldn't afford it. Then, I remembered Tom, Mark's disgruntled coworker. He was intelligent, resourceful, and he had a score to settle with Carol. I reached out to Tom, explaining my plan and asking for his assistance. To my surprise, he agreed without hesitation. He had always suspected that Carol was behind his professional misfortunes, and he was eager to get revenge. Tom had a knack for technology and was also skilled at bypassing security systems. Together, we spent weeks planning the break-in, studying the mansion's layout, and identifying potential weaknesses in its security. Tom managed to acquire blueprints of the house, which gave us a detailed understanding of its interior. We discovered that the mansion had a state-of-the-art alarm system, but Tom was confident that he could disable it. The biggest challenge was getting past the security guards, who patrolled the property around the clock. We decided to wait for a night when there was a special event at the mansion, hoping that the guards would be distracted by the guests. Finally, the night arrived. I was nervous, but determined to see the plan through. Tom and I drove to the mansion, parking a few blocks away to avoid suspicion. As we approached the property, we could see that the event was in full swing. Music and laughter filled the air, and the driveway was lined with expensive cars. Tom used his technical expertise to disable the alarm system, creating a window of opportunity for us to enter. We slipped through a side gate, making our way to the back of the mansion. The garden was deserted. The guests were all inside enjoying the party. We found a back door that led into the kitchen. Tom quickly picked the lock and we slipped inside. The kitchen was empty, but we could hear the sounds of the party coming from the nearby ballroom. We made our way through the house, trying to avoid being seen by the staff. Tom led the way, using the blueprints to navigate the labyrinthine corridors. We finally reached Carol's bedroom, a lavishly decorated suite on the second floor. The room was opulent and extravagant, filled with expensive furniture and designer clothes. I began searching for the diary, carefully examining every drawer, every shelf, every hiding place. I looked under the bed, in the closet, even inside the lampshades. But the diary was nowhere to be found. Just as I was about to give up, I spotted a small, antique-looking box on the top shelf of the bookcase. I reached for the box, my heart pounding in my chest. It was locked, but Tom quickly picked the lock with a hairpin. Inside the box, I found a small, leather-bound diary. It was exactly what I had been looking for. I opened the diary, my hands trembling. The first page was dated several years ago. As I began to read, I was horrified by what I discovered. The diary was filled with Carol's twisted thoughts, her manipulative schemes, and her complete lack of remorse. She had meticulously planned every step of her life, using people as pawns in her game. She had even written about her affair with Mark, describing it as a calculated risk that would help her climb the social ladder. As I read further, I uncovered even more shocking revelations. Carol had been involved in several shady business deals, using her charm and manipulation to defraud investors and steal their money. She had even sabotaged the careers of her rivals, spreading false rumors and leaking confidential information. The diary was a treasure trove of incriminating evidence, enough to destroy Carol's life and send her to prison. I closed the diary, my mind reeling. I had finally uncovered the truth about Carol, and it was even more disturbing than I had imagined. But just as I was about to leave, I heard a noise outside the door. Someone was coming. Panic surged through me. We were trapped. There was no way out without being seen. Tom and I quickly hid behind a large wardrobe, holding our breath as the door creaked open. It was Carol. She entered the room, humming to herself as she walked towards the vanity. She sat down and began to remove her makeup, oblivious to our presence. I peeked through a crack in the wardrobe, watching her every move. Carol seemed unusually tense, her hands trembling as she applied her moisturizer. After a few minutes, she stood up and walked towards the bookcase. My heart skipped a beat. She was heading straight for the box where I had found the diary. I knew that we had to act fast or we would be caught red-handed. I grabbed Tom's arm, signaling him to be ready. As Carol reached for the box, we burst out from behind the wardrobe, startling her. She screamed, dropping the box on the floor. "What are you doing here?" she shrieked, her eyes wide with terror. "You're not supposed to be in here." I stepped forward, holding up the diary. "We know everything, Carol," I said, my voice cold and unwavering. "We know about your schemes, your lies, your betrayals." Carol's face flushed with anger. "You can't prove anything," she spat. "This diary is just a bunch of harmless ramblings." I laughed. "Harmless? This diary is filled with evidence of your crimes, Carol. Fraud, manipulation, even sabotage. You're going to pay for what you've done." Carol lunged at me, trying to grab the diary, but I was too quick for her. I dodged her attack and held the diary out of her reach. Tom stepped in front of me, blocking Carol's path. "Don't even think about it, Carol," he said, his voice menacing. "We're not going to let you get away with this." Carol realized that she was outnumbered. Her face crumpled in defeat. "Please," she begged, her voice trembling. "Don't do this to me. I'll do anything, just don't turn me in." I stared at her, my heart filled with contempt. She was willing to grovel, to humiliate herself, just to avoid the consequences of her actions. I felt a surge of satisfaction, knowing that I had finally broken her. "It's too late for that, Carol," I said. "You should have thought about the consequences before you started playing your games." Just then, we heard the sound of footsteps approaching the room. It was Carol's husband. He must have heard the commotion and come to investigate. We had to get out of there, and fast. I grabbed Tom's arm, and we ran out of the room, leaving Carol cowering on the floor. We made our way through the mansion, dodging security guards and party guests. We finally reached the back door and slipped out into the night. As we ran towards our car, I could hear Carol's husband shouting in the distance. We jumped into the car and sped away, leaving the mansion and Carol's life of lies behind us. But even though we had escaped, I knew that the night was far from over. Carol wouldn't let this go easily. She would come after us, seeking revenge. We had to be prepared for whatever she had in store. The next morning, I woke up to a flurry of missed calls and text messages. It was David, frantic with worry. He had seen the news reports about a break-in at Carol's mansion, and he was afraid that I was involved. I called him back, explaining everything that had happened. He was shocked and concerned, but he also admired my courage and determination. He promised to support me, no matter what. As I hung up the phone, I received a call from Tom. He told me that Carol had filed a police report, accusing us of burglary and assault. The police were investigating, and they wanted to question us. I knew that we had to turn ourselves in, but I was afraid of what might happen. Carol was a powerful and influential woman. She could use her connections to manipulate the legal system and make us look guilty. I contacted a lawyer, explaining the situation and asking for his advice. He told me that we had a strong defense, but that we needed to be prepared for a long and arduous legal battle. He advised us to gather as much evidence as possible to support our claims. I spent the next few days working with Tom, compiling evidence and preparing our defense. We collected documents, emails, and witness statements that would prove Carol's crimes and expose her manipulative behavior. We also made copies of Carol's diary, which we planned to use as key evidence in our case. As we were preparing our defense, we received a threatening message from Carol. She warned us to drop the charges and return the diary, or she would make our lives a living hell. I refused to be intimidated. I knew that Carol was desperate and that she was willing to do anything to protect herself. But I was determined to see her brought to justice, no matter the cost. The day arrived when we had to turn ourselves in to the police. I was nervous, but I knew that we were doing the right thing. We arrived at the police station with our lawyer, ready to face the music. The police questioned us for hours, grilling us about the break-in and our motives. We answered their questions honestly and truthfully, presenting our evidence and explaining our side of the story. After the interrogation, the police released us on bail, pending further investigation. As we left the police station, I saw Carol standing across the street, glaring at us with hatred in her eyes. I knew that this was just the beginning. The legal battle was going to be long and difficult, and Carol would stop at nothing to destroy us. But I was ready for the fight. I had David, Tom, and my lawyer by my side, and I had the truth on my side. I was determined to expose Carol's lies and bring her to justice, no matter the cost. But even as I steeled myself for the coming battle, a nagging doubt lingered in my mind. What if Carol was too powerful? What if she managed to manipulate the legal system and escape justice? What if, in the end, she emerged victorious, leaving me and Tom ruined and defeated? The thought sent a shiver down my spine. I couldn't let that happen. I had to find a way to ensure that Carol paid for her crimes once and for all. But how? Weeks turned into months, and the legal battle with Carol dragged on. The media picked up the story, turning it into a sensationalized soap opera. I was portrayed as a scorned ex-wife seeking revenge, while Carol was depicted as a glamorous socialite fighting for her reputation. The public was divided, with some people supporting me and others siding with Carol. The stress of the legal battle took a toll on my personal life. I struggled to sleep, I lost my appetite, and I became increasingly withdrawn. David tried his best to support me, but he was also worried about the impact the case was having on my health and well-being. Tom was equally stressed, but he remained steadfast in his commitment to seeing Carol brought to justice. He spent countless hours poring over legal documents, searching for any loophole or inconsistency that could help our case. As the trial approached, I began to lose hope. Carol's lawyers were skilled and ruthless, and they were doing everything they could to discredit me and Tom. They painted us as liars, criminals, and unstable individuals who were obsessed with destroying Carol's life. They even tried to suppress Carol's diary, claiming that it was illegally obtained and therefore inadmissible in court. Just when I thought all was lost, I received a phone call from an anonymous source. The caller claimed to have information that could help our case, but they were afraid to come forward publicly. I arranged to meet the caller in a discreet location. When I arrived, I was surprised to see that it was one of Carol's former employees. The employee, a young woman named Emily, had worked as Carol's personal assistant for several years. She had witnessed Carol's manipulative behavior firsthand, and she was disgusted by her lies and betrayals. Emily had secretly recorded several conversations with Carol, capturing her boasting about her crimes and plotting her schemes. She was willing to testify against Carol in court, but she wanted to remain anonymous for fear of retaliation. I was overjoyed. Emily's testimony could be the key to winning the case. I convinced her to come forward, promising her that we would protect her from Carol's wrath. With Emily's help, we were able to strengthen our defense and expose Carol's lies to the world. The trial began, and the courtroom was packed with reporters, spectators, and supporters from both sides. The atmosphere was tense and electric, as the truth about Carol's life was about to be revealed. Carol took the stand, denying all of the charges against her. She claimed that she was a victim of a smear campaign, orchestrated by jealous rivals and disgruntled employees. But her lies quickly unraveled under the relentless questioning of our lawyer. We presented Emily's recordings, which captured Carol admitting to her crimes in her own voice. We also introduced Carol's diary, which provided a detailed account of her manipulative schemes and betrayals. The evidence was overwhelming, and it became clear to everyone in the courtroom that Carol was guilty. As the trial drew to a close, I took the stand to share my story. I spoke about my marriage to Mark, my betrayal by Carol, and my journey to seek justice. I spoke from the heart, and my words resonated with the jury. After several days of deliberation, the jury reached a verdict. Carol was found guilty on all charges. The courtroom erupted in applause as the verdict was read. Carol's face crumpled in defeat, and she began to sob uncontrollably. She was sentenced to several years in prison, and her life of lies and manipulation came crashing down around her. As Carol was led away in handcuffs, I felt a sense of closure and relief wash over me. The legal battle had been long and arduous, but it had been worth it. I had finally brought Carol to justice, and I had reclaimed my life. But even as I celebrated my victory, I couldn't help but wonder what the future held. Would I ever be able to truly move on from the pain and betrayal of the past? Or would I always be haunted by the memory of Carol's deceit? In the aftermath of the trial, my life slowly began to return to normal. The media attention died down, and I was able to focus on my work, my relationship with David, and my own personal healing. I continued to see a therapist who helped me to process my emotions and develop healthy coping mechanisms. I learned to forgive myself for the mistakes I had made and to accept that I couldn't control the actions of others. I also realized that I was stronger and more resilient than I had ever imagined. The experience with Carol had tested me to my limits, but it had also taught me valuable lessons about myself and the world. David remained my rock throughout the entire ordeal. His love, support, and unwavering belief in me had helped me to stay strong and focused. We grew even closer, and our relationship deepened. One evening, as we were sitting on the porch watching the sunset, David turned to me and said, "You know, I've been thinking about something." I looked at him expectantly. "I think we should start a family," he said. My heart skipped a beat. Having children had always been a dream of mine, but I had put it on hold after my experience with Mark. I was afraid that I wouldn't be a good mother, that I would repeat the mistakes of the past. But David's words filled me with hope and excitement. I knew that he would be a wonderful father and that we could create a loving and supportive environment for our children. I smiled at him, tears welling up in my eyes. "I would love that," I said. A year later, we welcomed our first child into the world, a beautiful baby girl named Lily. As I held her in my arms, I felt a sense of completeness and joy that I had never experienced before. I knew that I had finally found true happiness and that my life was exactly where it was supposed to be. But even as I embraced my new role as a mother, I couldn't completely forget about Carol. I often wondered what she was doing in prison and if she had ever truly repented for her crimes. One day, I received a letter from Carol. I hesitated before opening it, unsure if I wanted to hear what she had to say. But curiosity got the better of me, and I tore open the envelope. Inside, I found a handwritten letter. In the letter, Carol expressed her remorse for her actions and apologized for the pain she had caused me. She admitted that she had been driven by greed and ambition, and that she had lost sight of what was truly important in life. She said that she had spent her time in prison reflecting on her mistakes, and that she was determined to become a better person. She asked for my forgiveness, not because she deserved it, but because she needed it to move on with her life. As I read Carol's letter, I felt a mix of emotions. I was skeptical of her sincerity, but I also felt a glimmer of hope that she had truly changed. I realized that holding on to anger and resentment would only harm me in the long run. I decided to forgive Carol, not for her sake, but for my own. I wrote her back, telling her that I forgave her and that I hoped she could find peace and redemption. I never heard from Carol again, but I often thought about her and wondered if she had ever managed to turn her life around. As I looked at my daughter, Lily, I knew that I had made the right decision. Forgiving Carol had allowed me to move on with my life and create a better future for myself and my family. The experience with Carol had taught me valuable lessons about the importance of love, forgiveness, and self-acceptance. And I knew that I would carry those lessons with me for the rest of my life. But just as I thought I had finally put the past behind me, I received a phone call that would change everything. The call came late one night. It was from a detective with the Denver Police Department. He informed me that Carol had been released from prison on parole. My heart sank. I had hoped that I would never have to think about Carol again, but now she was back, and I had no idea what she was planning. The detective assured me that they would be monitoring Carol's activities and that they would notify me if she posed a threat. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something bad was about to happen. I told David about Carol's release, and he was equally concerned. We decided to take extra precautions to protect ourselves and our daughter. We installed a security system in our home, and we made sure to always lock our doors and windows. I also started carrying a can of pepper spray with me whenever I went out. As the days turned into weeks, I became increasingly paranoid. I was constantly looking over my shoulder, and I couldn't shake the feeling that Carol was watching me. I started having nightmares, reliving the pain and betrayal of the past. David tried his best to reassure me, but he could see that I was struggling. He suggested that we take a vacation to get away from the stress and anxiety. I agreed, and we booked a trip to Hawaii. I hoped that the warm sun and the beautiful beaches would help me to relax and forget about Carol. But even in paradise, I couldn't shake the feeling that danger was lurking around the corner. One afternoon, as I was walking along the beach, I saw a familiar figure in the distance. It was Carol. My heart skipped a beat. I couldn't believe that she had followed me all the way to Hawaii. I turned and ran in the opposite direction, desperate to escape her. But Carol was faster than I expected. She caught up to me and grabbed my arm. "Sarah," she said, her voice cold and menacing. "We need to talk." I tried to pull away, but she held on tight. "Let go of me, Carol," I said, my voice trembling. "I don't want anything to do with you." "Oh, but you do," she said, her eyes glinting with madness. "You have something that belongs to me." I was confused. "What are you talking about?" "My diary," she said. "You stole it from me and I want it back." I realized that Carol hadn't come to Hawaii to reconcile. She had come to get revenge. I refused to give her the diary. It was evidence of her crimes, and I couldn't let her destroy it. Carol became enraged. She lunged at me, trying to snatch my purse. I fought back, kicking and screaming. The struggle attracted the attention of other beachgoers who rushed to our aid. Carol realized that she was outnumbered, and she ran away, disappearing into the crowd. I was shaken and terrified. I knew that Carol wouldn't give up easily. She would continue to haunt me until she got what she wanted. I had to find a way to stop her once and for all. But how? That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind was racing, trying to figure out a way to protect myself and my family from Carol. I knew that I couldn't run forever. I had to confront her, and I had to be prepared for anything. As I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, I had an idea. It was risky and dangerous, but it was the only way to ensure that Carol would never harm me or my family again. I decided to set a trap for Carol, to lure her into a situation where she could be apprehended by the police. I knew that Carol was obsessed with money and power, and that she would do anything to get her hands on them. I decided to use that obsession against her. I contacted Carol, pretending to be interested in investing in one of her shady business ventures. I told her that I had inherited a large sum of money and that I was looking for a lucrative investment opportunity. I made it sound too good to be true, knowing that Carol wouldn't be able to resist the temptation. Carol agreed to meet me to discuss the details of the investment. I chose a secluded location for the meeting, a deserted warehouse on the outskirts of town. I knew that Carol would be suspicious, so I made sure to bring a bodyguard with me, just in case. The day of the meeting arrived. I was nervous, but determined to see the plan through. David tried to talk me out of it, but I refused to back down. I knew that this was the only way to protect my family. I arrived at the warehouse with my bodyguard, and we waited for Carol to arrive. After a few minutes, a car pulled up to the warehouse and Carol stepped out. She looked even more menacing than I remembered. Her eyes were cold and calculating, and her face was etched with hatred. She approached me cautiously, her hand hidden inside her purse. "So, you're the one with the money," she said, her voice dripping with suspicion. "That's right," I said, trying to sound confident. "I'm ready to invest, but I need to see some proof that your business is legitimate." Carol smiled, a sinister grin that sent a shiver down my spine. "Of course," she said. "I have all the documents right here." She reached into her purse and pulled out a folder. As she handed me the folder, I noticed something glinting in her hand. It was a gun. My heart skipped a beat. I knew that Carol was planning to kill me. I quickly signaled to my bodyguard, who stepped forward and disarmed Carol. Carol screamed, her face contorted with rage. "You set me up," she shrieked. "You're going to pay for this." Just then, the police arrived, sirens blaring. They rushed into the warehouse and apprehended Carol. As they led her away in handcuffs, she turned to me and glared. "This isn't over, Sarah," she said. "I'll get you for this." I watched as she was driven away, knowing that I had finally defeated her. I had set a trap for Carol, and she had fallen right into it. She was now back in prison where she belonged, and I was finally free. In the years that followed, I never heard from Carol again. I tried to put her out of my mind, focusing on my family, my work, and my own personal happiness. David and I had another child, a son named Ethan. Our lives were filled with love, laughter, and joy. I often thought about the lessons I had learned from my experience with Carol. I had learned the importance of forgiveness, self-acceptance, and the power of love. I had also learned that even the most difficult challenges can be overcome with courage, determination, and the support of loved ones. One day, as I was volunteering at my daughter's school, I received a phone call from a woman who identified herself as Carol's daughter, Emily. I was surprised and hesitant to speak with her, but I decided to listen to what she had to say. Emily told me that Carol had passed away in prison. She had been suffering from a long-term illness, and she had finally succumbed to her disease. Emily said that Carol had asked her to contact me, to apologize for the pain she had caused me, and to thank me for helping her to find redemption. Emily also told me that Carol had left me a letter to be delivered after her death. I was stunned. I had never expected to hear from Carol again, and now she was gone. I agreed to meet with Emily, to receive the letter and to learn more about Carol's final days. When I met Emily, I was struck by her kindness and compassion. She was nothing like her mother. She had grown up in a difficult environment, but she had managed to overcome her challenges and become a successful and compassionate person. She handed me the letter from Carol, and I thanked her for reaching out to me. I waited until I was alone to read the letter. As I opened it, I felt a sense of sadness and closure wash over me. In the letter, Carol expressed her deepest regrets for the pain she had caused me. She said that she had finally realized the error of her ways, and that she had spent her final days trying to make amends for her mistakes. She thanked me for forgiving her, and she said that my forgiveness had given her the strength to face her death with peace and dignity. She also asked me to forgive Emily and to help her to find happiness and success in her life. As I finished reading the letter, tears streamed down my face. I had finally received the closure that I needed. I had forgiven Carol, and she had forgiven herself. We had both found peace, and we were both free. I knew that Carol's legacy would always be a part of my story, but I refused to let it define me. I would continue to live my life to the fullest, embracing love, joy, and happiness. And I would always remember the lessons I had learned from my experience with Carol, the lessons that had made me a stronger, more compassionate, and more resilient person. As I walked away from the meeting with Emily, I looked up at the sky and smiled. The sun was shining, the birds were singing, and the world was filled with hope. I knew that my life was exactly where it was supposed to be, and I was finally at peace.